Hi, I'm Mike Chupp, and this is CMDA Matters, a weekly podcast from the Christian Medical and Dental Associations. You know, February is Black History Month, which commemorates the considerable achievements and contributions of African Americans in the United States. And today on CMDA Matters, I invited one of the members of our CMDA board, Dr. Omari Hodge. He's an African American family physician, and he's going to share with us how he feels we're doing at CMDA and in healthcare in general in terms of addressing the topic of racism. But before we get to that, I wanted to let you know about a few upcoming CMDA activities that maybe you should check out. We actually have not just one, but two different tours coming up in May to the country of Italy. If you're interested, you might want to register today as these tours fill up very quickly. Dr. Gene Rudd, who leads the CMDA Encore Ministry, and his wife, Gay, are leading a trip to Italy May 3rd through the 15th. And our Campus and Community Ministries Director, Bill Reichart, and his wife, Lauren, are leading a second trip in Italy May 24th through June 5th. Our Italy tour begins in the north at Venice, and if you go, you'll travel south through Florence to Rome. And for those staying for the optional extension, the tour goes further south to visit Naples, Pompeii, Castel Gandolfo, and more. To register, you just need to go to cmda.org/overseas-tours. That's overseas-tours. And of course, our staff here at CMDA are busy with multiple conferences, including our national convention, which will be held at the Northern Kentucky Convention Center in Covington, Kentucky, just across the river from downtown Cincinnati. Our convention will be April 16th through the 19th this year. The Right of Conscience and Cultural Change in Medicine is also coming up this Leap Day in Dallas, Texas. And finally, there's a Grace Prescription Seminar in St. Cloud, Minnesota, also on Leap Day. You can find all about these events and conferences by going to cmda.org/events. Well, you've waited long enough. Let's get to our conversation with Dr. Omari Hodge in recognition of Black History Month 2020. Well, it is an amazing privilege today to invite to the program Dr. Omari Hodge, who's a board-certified family medicine physician. Omari earned his medical degree at the Morehouse School of Medicine, and he's currently on faculty with the family medicine residency program at Wellstar Hospital in Marietta, Georgia. Dr. Hodge is a current member and has been for many years of CMDA, and he also has been serving for the last couple of years on our board of trustees, and that's how I've gotten to know Omari and his wife, Kira, a whole lot better personally. Have loved hearing from his wife, and we have great prayer times with the board, and I've had a lot of good laughs together about our families. Omari loves traveling, mission work, and spending time with his wife, Kira, and their 4 children. Well, today it's also my privilege to have joining me as a co-host for this interview, Reverend Bill Reichart, who is the director for CMDA's National Campus and Community Ministries. And the method to my madness this morning of inviting Bill is that Bill and Omari have had a very long-term relationship in the city of Atlanta because Bill was the Atlanta area director for CMDA and worked together with Omari on his council, and they have done a lot of things in the trenches in ministry and healthcare together. So, Bill, welcome to CMDA Matters.
Thanks, Mike, and glad to have you on the program, Omari. And I'm going to let you launch, Omari, with a letter that you have, I know, before you that I think is going to tee up our conversation together as we talk about the intersection of race and medicine. It's a letter from Embry School of Medicine, and it was written to a Marion Hood in 1959. I'm going to let you take it from here, Omari. Go ahead and just read this letter, and I think it'll help, again, launch us into our conversation together.
I'd love to. Thanks, Mike and Bill, for having me. I'm really excited to be here. But, yeah, let's get straight into this letter. The letter, as you correctly attested to, was written to Mr. Marion Gerald Hood in 1959. And without further ado, let me just read what it says. It says, Dear Mr. Hood, acknowledgement is made of your letter of July 30th enclosing your application for admission to our School of Medicine. I am sorry, I must write you that we are not authorized to consider for admission a member of the Negro race. I regret that we cannot help you. Yours very truly, L.L. Clay, Director of Admissions. P.S. I am returning herewith your $5 application fee. So, yeah, obviously there's a lot that we could talk about in this letter, and I wish the only problem was that the application fee was only $5 back then. But there are some more pressing issues with that letter that we probably should address.
When we look and listen to this letter that you just shared with me yesterday, Omari, some 60 years ago, why is this something we should still reflect on after all this time? Obviously, an incredible travesty in the 1950s. Aren't we just dwelling in the past by spending time with issues like this? Why is it important still to be talking about this in 2020?
That's a great question, and I think the answer to that question, how it's answered, really determines the trajectory moving forward of whether or not letters like this still have relevance. So I think the best example to use is, and I like to use modern-day examples just because that's how I think. I'm a very tangible, foot-to-the-ground type of guy. And if you ever think about a funeral, unfortunately, I've been to a few of them. As a matter of fact, my aunt, who was kind of like a second mother to me, she recently passed of cervical cancer. She fought a long fight, but I had to go to her funeral. And one of the things I've noticed at funerals is that when you get together, everybody's talking about the person who they lost. Everybody's talking about the good times that you had. But you can really tell who is connected or the depth of relationship that existed with an individual by whether or not they're talking about the bad times, too. So if it was a coworker at work, you might talk about the things that happened at work that were good and what an asset they were to the team. But if it was a brother or sister, you might talk about that time that both of you guys snuck out and you went on to the movies when you weren't supposed to be moving, and you took the car and you got caught and Dad ran around the house and looked, you can laugh about those things because it doesn't tarnish their memory. And it also adds closure to the issue at hand. And I think it's the same way with issues like this. When we look at issues like this and we take the time to go back in the past and see what has happened, and we take time to properly mourn them, it allows us the freedom to move forward soberly. Just like I can't think of any way possible for me to have moved forward, having lost my aunt who was like a second mother, without taking time to acknowledge what she meant to me, what she's meant to my life, the things about her that I love, the things about her that I didn't like. All of that together helped propel me in a healthy direction forward and freed me in a way that I can handle new situations without having any unnecessary regret or any overwhelming sense of shame, because I spent time and did the due diligence to properly examine in the past what certain things meant to me. And I think this is a perfect example of a situation that you don't want to just sweep under the rug, that you want to acknowledge that it happened, not to make somebody feel bad. I mean, funerals are sad, and you cry or you feel shame, whatever it is that you may feel. But the more important thing is when you move on, the type of person you are and the individual you are, it changes your trajectory and it ensures that you make steps in the direction that you really want to go.
Well, Omari, that's a very powerful word picture, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. And I know a number of organizations, churches, denominations have tried to officially mourn the past. I'm thinking of the Southern Baptists, and they've been looking back at what's happened in the past and officially being very open and vulnerable that we messed up in the past. And certainly as CMDA, as you are aware, because you were on the task force, the racism task force, I believe, and just working through issues of what kind of statements we want to make today. I mean, there have been so many advances, Omari, in medicine, with vaccinations, cancer treatments, imaging modalities, so much progress. In your opinion, has medicine made similar strides against institutionalized or organizational racism?
That's a great question, and it really depends on who you ask. I think personally the answer is yes, but it's not as simple as just a yes. Going back to imagery, my kids, I have a 14-year-old, a 12-year-old, 18-year-old, and a 21-year-old, but let me just talk about my 14-year-old Kai. Kai he's a great kid, but Kai has this thing of when I ask him to do chores or when he gets into trouble, he compares himself to his younger sister. Well, she didn't do that, and she didn't have to do that. Why do I have to do that? And I'm sure any parent who's listening right now totally understands what I'm talking about. If you have multiple kids, if it's just one, if you were like me and you were only child, well, I'm sorry. But if you had siblings who you could blame things,
you were in paradise, Omari.
yeah, that's what I say. And I really think that's the way you have to look at progress. So yes, if you ask me, compared to 1959 when this letter was written to Gerald Hood, or even prior to that, when it was even unfathomable that that a black person would even apply to medical school, have we progressed from that? Absolutely. I mean, I don't think you would be being honest or genuine to say that that's not the case. Unfortunately, though, and fortunately, as far as believers are concerned, I don't know that that's the standard that we're held to necessarily compare ourselves to the past and say, okay, have we made progress from there? I think what we really have to do is really compare ourselves to the Word of God and compare ourselves to what we know or what we believe should be accomplished and determine, okay, are we living in a way that allows us to accomplish the goals that we think need to be set right now? Not based on the same metric that was used in 1959, but what are the metrics that are used right now in 2020? So overall, I would say I do think that things are much better than they have been as it pertains to institutionalized racism or gender inequality and all of these issues. But particularly since we're talking about race, yes, I think things have improved. But that is not the scoring card that we get to use individually, especially as believers when we're held to such a high standard when we look at God's vision for us as it pertains to the Word of God.
Thanks, Omari. Let me dovetail on what you're saying here with the illustration of something that I believe became kind of into the kind of cultural consciousness of late. I was in a conversation with my son-in-law, Brendan Gagan, who is a second-year medical student at Tulane, and we were visiting over the holidays, and we were talking about a fellow student of his, Russell Leddett, who, along with several other black male and female medical students from Tulane, took a photo. And I don't know if anybody out there had a chance to see this. If you need to look at it, you can simply Google Tulane Medical Students Plantation. But this photo was taken in front of slave quarters at a former slave plantation called Whitney Plantation in Louisiana. And there, Russell and his fellow students were standing there with their white coats in a very stoic and powerful image. And I think there was obviously a statement they were making in and through that to fellow students and to the culture at large, saying, look where we've come, look at the change. But talk about that is a powerful visual image. Speak personally about the significance of seeing such a photo like that and its impact.
I did see the photo, and I do agree that is a very powerful image. When you think of the fact that, a few years going backwards, that wouldn't have even been thought of, let alone accomplished, standing on a plantation that was formerly occupied by slaves, and now it's medical students in their white coats being able to pose. The meanings and it's like the artwork in your mind and the places that you can go are just boundless. So you're right, it is powerful, especially I'll say as a black man, a black male physician, a Christian black male physician. It really does speak a lot to me in terms of understanding how God hears his people and he understands the plight of all his people, regardless of what you look like, where you come from, what your background is. And he answers these prayers in his perfect time and in his perfect season. I don't know why the prayers weren't answered sooner, and I don't know why 2020 is when the picture was finally taken. But I'm so thankful it is, and it does give me hope moving forward. One of the things I always think about when I looked at this photo is I always felt like, I think the photo in itself stands alone, and I don't think anything needs to be added or taken away from it for you to really understand its power. But I really wish a second photo was done with this photo. I want this photo exactly how it is because I love it. But I wonder if another photo with any of the family members who used to be owners of this plantation, how awesome would that have been if they were moved in their heart to take a photo with these black medical students together in unison. I always feel like these victories, it was one of the things I really loved about Martin Luther King, is that he understood that his cause was to fight against social injustice and to see things change. But he wasn't exclusive in making sure that these things happened. As much as he could, whenever he could, he wanted to bring other people in to celebrate with him. Mm. And so not to take away from this photo, please don't hear me and say that there's anything wrong with this photo at all. I'm just wondering if the next step might not be reaching out to some of these former family members who may not even know that their families own these properties, and asking them, hey, would you like to take a picture with us showing where we plan to go in the future?
I think that would be very powerful. I agree with you, Omari. And, as I was hearing Russell Leddit, the individual who took the initiative to get this photo, the students gathered together for this photo, in addition, I should say, to not only kind of declaring, how far black men and women have come, that they now are standing on these steps here at this plantation, but he was also making a statement to future generations. It really was an aspirational photo, too, for his daughter in particular, to see what they can aspire to, what can be in their future, that this is not out of reach. And I think that's an important message, too, moving forward, is what are some of the systemic issues we got to address to get more young black boys and girls into STEM programs? So they're studying science and technology and so forth, that they are able to find their way in this journey to a place where they themselves can go to medical school.
You're so very right. As I was actually talking about this with a journalist not too long ago, and the subject of their news program was particularly dealing with that very issue, the number of specifically black males in medicine today, which unfortunately is actually going backwards. I think the numbers that they said were comparable to the 60s and 70s, which is not even fathomable today. It's like, how does that happen? And you're right. I think there are still pockets and institutionalized systems where there are blind spots, I'll say, that are allowing these things to be perpetuated. And I would say this, I don't think most people go about their day striving to make it difficult for black males to become a doctor. But I do think that most people may fail to understand the need for an intentional hand of support and intentional awareness of what a multicultural society looks like and what that requires for it to happen, because that type of thing that just doesn't fall into your lap. That takes some work.
Omari, I wanted to ask, how can our members, those who are guests listening in to this CMDA Matters podcast right now, how can they ensure that they are part of creating the kind of healthy environment you've been talking about with medicine that is maybe more in line with what we see the Apostle John writing in Revelations 7:9. After this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. They were wearing white robes and were holding palm branches in their hands. What do you suggest to our listeners?
That is, I love that scripture, and that is a powerful statement of what I believe God wants us to accomplish on this earth. And of course, there's so many ways that you can answer it. I only have the disadvantage of only being able to talk from my vantage point. But from what I see, I think the biggest thing is, if I could sum it in one word, it would be intentionality. We really have to make a decision in our personal lives of what we want healthcare and medicine and our lives to look like. By default, on any day and time, I'm just speaking personally, by default, without any effort, without even thinking about it, I could have a gathering of any number of black people celebrating any type of issue that I wanted to celebrate, or having a conversation, or maybe it's just a party. It would take no effort for me. However, if I'm trying to reach out to people of different backgrounds, whether they're white, Hispanic, Asian, that's something I actually have to think about. I didn't grow up in those cultures. I don't understand many things that are implicit to being of those ethnic backgrounds. So that takes some work, and it takes a deliberate action by me in saying I want to include these people in what I see as success moving forward. And I think it's the same way in healthcare and medicine and Christianity for us as believers. We have to, whether it's in our workforce, whether it's in our neighborhood, we have to find ways to ensure that we're engaged in the issues that are facing these people. So if I'm a white person listening to this podcast, this is not the issue of the shortage of black males is not an issue related to black males. That's a Christian issue that my brothers and sisters need help with. You really have to feel it that way, because the Bible says that he puts his treasures in these earthen vessels. And each of us has this treasure. And there's no way that I can really understand the riches of God and his grace and his love if all the treasure that I associate with is like myself. I want treasures from everywhere. I want treasures from Asia. I want treasures from Africa. I want treasures from South America. The more treasure, the better, because I know it just shows me a different face of God. So I think we have to be intentional about it and see the problems that are dealt with in any ethnic group as our problems. We really have to understand that we are believers first. We are Christians before we're anything else. And if we believe that, then these issues will not just be a problem for other people who don't look like me. They'll be our problem, and we'll want to figure out how to solve them, or what can we do.
Well, I wanted to share with you several members of the CMDA Racism Task Force that you were a part of invited me to a meal after the board had approved that position statement that's available for everyone online. And they said, Mike, this is great. It's a statement, but we want to challenge you not to just stop there and have a statement online and feel good, pat ourselves on the back. And so they sent me, in medicine, we, Dr. Hodge, we love alliteration. We love ways to remember things. And so they told me about the 5 Ps, and I went back to surgical residency thinking about the ischemic limb and pulselessness and poikilothermia and paresthesias. Those are bad Ps, but these are good Ps, 5 Ps. And I'm just going to share them with you briefly so our listeners can hear how I was challenged. And the first P is pursue, change by intentionally advocating for diversity and, recruiting a lawyer and accountant to the CMDA Board of Trustees, because of their expertise and background, but also pursuing members of minorities to serve on our board, which, of course, we're delighted that you've joined us on our board. But also another P, pray for God to bring people and bless CMDA with ethnic diversity, something we can do on a daily basis. Prepare the present CMDA body by educating and informing them of biblical importance of ethnic diversity, probing by those who are out there are grassroots leaders, local councils, regional directors, area directors, and even our CMDA members to look out for ethnic minority healthcare professionals that might be interested and qualify for CMDA leadership positions. And then finally, the P of preferring intentionally those of different ethnicity as one of the characteristics in choosing future leadership and role models for the organization, for CMDA. So I thought that was great, those 5 Ps, Omari.
That is powerful.
Bill, you were sharing with me a story. Now, maybe we should call you Bill Harvey Reichart, that there is we don't want to leave our listeners with the fact that there was this terrible, dismal, awful letter that we regret from the 50s, but there's more to that story.
Right. Well, yes, we want to shy away from using those dated references, right, Paul Harvey? No, most of our listeners probably will know who he is. If you do remember his radio show, you talked about the rest of the story, and I do want to kind of put a bookend on our time together with you, Omari, by going back to the original letter that you read to Marion Hood from Emory. The rest of that story, if you do some digging and research, you'll find that Marion Hood persevered. He persevered beyond that difficult experience, and he went on to eventually graduate from Loyola University School of Medicine in Chicago in 1966, and went on to specialize and get further trained as an OB-GYN, and had served in medicine faithfully for 50 years, and is now currently residing in Atlanta. And so Marion Hood is now Dr. Marion Hood, and has persevered and has gone on to serve in a field that not only was he gifted to serve in, but has been a blessing to so many others. And also, as a footnote to this story, let me just say about Emory, as of a couple of years ago, Emory School of Medicine registered one of the highest percentage, at about 23% of their incoming students were black men and women. So obviously things have changed significantly at Emory School of Medicine as well. So obviously, to our discussion, Omari, we've talked about opportunities, and God has done something different in 2020 than what was teed up in the letter that you read in 1959. But this discussion goes broader than just that, as I think you aptly communicated. So I I appreciate what you've been sharing, Omari, and I know that this is a discussion that we're robustly having within CMDA, talking about the future of this work and ministry.
And I echo that, Omari. Dr. Hodge, thank you for joining. February's Black History Month. And thank you for helping us to highlight this for our relatively new podcast program, CMDA Matters, because all of our members matter. And we want a picture at CMDA all across this country of Christians in healthcare who are bringing hope and healing, the hope and healing of Christ to the world through a diverse and well-represented body of Christ to demonstrate to the world a preview of someday that we'll be celebrating before God's throne together, Omari.
You guys have said everything so wonderful, and I totally echo. I'm so pleased with the direction of leadership that you have us as a corporate CMDA going in, and I look forward to what lies ahead in the future and for more opportunities to talk not just about race, but talk about all the issues that we deal with here as Christians and where we meet at the intersections of Christianity and medicine and how we tackle them moving forward. We got a lot of battles to fight, but we're up to the task, especially with you guys at the helm.
Omari was gracious to take time out of what I imagine was a very busy morning in his office for that interview, because just 48 hours later, he joined several other Christian healthcare professionals on a short-term mission outreach to Ethiopia with Global Health Outreach of CMDA, where he's gone many times with many healthcare professionals from Atlanta. Our Board of Trustees members, like Omari, work very hard to represent you and CMDA. As I mentioned in the interview, our board in 2018 approved an excellent public policy statement on racism, which you can find on our website at cmda.org/position-statements. That's position-statements. You might not know that in the quarter century since CMDA launched our public policy ministry, many members have found exciting and impressive ways to engage in national public policy. We've helped some members to land top-flight careers in the federal government, where right now they are actually formulating some of our national policies. Other CMDA members have served on prestigious federal commissions in their field, networking with leading colleagues while influencing our U.S. national policy. Still others have testified in the United States Congress on tough and critical issues like abortion, health care, and assisted suicide. Others have served behind the scenes, quietly providing counsel and resources to our U.S. policymakers. If you might be interested in federal government service opportunities like these, I encourage you to join our Freedom #2 Care, Freedom to Care Federal Service group on LinkedIn. All you have to do is go to LinkedIn and search for the group Freedom #2 Care. That's Freedom, the number 2, Care. You can also let us know your specific interests by taking our Federal Service Survey. You just go to tinyurl.com/CMDA Survey 2020. That's tinyurl.com/CMDA Survey 2020. Think about joining your CMDA colleagues who are serving their country and God's kingdom as modern-day Esthers and Daniels influencing our government. At CMDA, we are all about changing hearts in healthcare. So until next week, I want to remind you of those 5 P's we discussed during the interview of successfully embracing diversity. Pursue it by being an advocate. Pray and ask God to bring people and bless CMDA with ethnic diversity. Prepare by understanding the biblical importance of ethnic diversity, and John Piper's book Bloodlines is an excellent resource. Probing by looking out for ethnic minority health professionals that might be interested and qualify for CMDA leadership positions wherever you are. And then the final P, preferring intentionally those of different ethnicity as one of the characteristics in choosing our future leadership and role models for our organization. Well, thank you for joining us today on CMDA Matters. And until next week, keep on fanning those flames of God's gift in your life. Have a great day.
This podcast has been a production of the Christian Medical and Dental Associations. The opinions expressed by guests on this podcast are not necessarily endorsed by the Christian Medical and Dental Associations. CMDA is a nonpartisan organization that does not endorse political parties or candidates for public office. The views expressed on this podcast reflect judgments regarding principles and values held by CMDA and its members and are not intended to imply endorsement of any political party or candidate.